A friend of mine who has a son who is in Gaza presently was mentioning that his job over there is to drive a heavy metal car made of absolute just sheer armor, very similar to some type of Brinks truck but 10 times bigger. And the objective of this car is to drive chayalim around from place to place, and obviously to be somewhat of a protective device to move them from place to place. And that's what he does most of the day, moving them around. So once after delivering the soldiers and putting them where they need to be, they put in the back over there a mechabelet. There was a woman who was also a terrorist, so to speak, that they were meant to take her into Israel and put her into justice, etc. And she was sitting in the back, basically, when he was driving the car. In the process of him driving this car that's called a Panther, he hit a explosive mine that was incredibly large. It was so large that if it was a normal car, it would have ripped into absolute shreds and pieces, the amount of the explosion that hit him. His ar, being the car that it was obviously well protected, flew up in the air a couple feet into the air and went back down on the floor. But not before it caused major damage to the back where it actually occurred. And you know who was in the back? That lady was in the back who lost both her feet from this event. Okay, but the idea behind it is to understand that normally he was driving around all of these soldiers from place to place, and Baruch Hashem, Mina Shamayim, Hashem worked it out that this mechabelet, this good-for-nothing lady, was in the back, and she's the one who ended up losing her feet in this process, and he came out unscathed. I mentioned this story and a couple more which I want to mention because the point is not all stories always make it to the news. Hafuch, these are the stories that really show us an important concept, and that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching us from behind the scenes. Sometimes there are things that we never hear about, never know about, but those are the places that we should know that Hashem is always watching us. Not always the famous, popular stories where you hear some incredible miracle that happened, but the run-of-the-mill stories that happen to people that never make it to the news, that's where we're able to see the siyata d'shmaya that happens on a constant basis to us. I'll give you a couple more. You know, a person by the name of Dvir Fisher, also, when he was fighting over there, he's actually a person who came out of his own volition to go ahead and fight in Gaza. He was actually hit by a bullet in the neck. It went in one side, out the other, and believe it or not, he ended up surviving. It didn't hit him in the vocal cords, he could still talk, it didn't go through any esophagus or tracheas. Incredibly, this person was able to survive. Again, stories that you might not have heard about, but you would have heard about him if you would have been just another number, unfortunately, in the many soldiers that died, and go, why? This is a very difficult war, and it is a very difficult war, and it's unfortunate that we're losing all of the greatest of our soldiers, and these are really the cream of the crop of the people. But at the same time, we have to see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reminds us with certain messages that reminds us on a constant basis that yes, I'm still here behind you and I'm watching out and leaving those miracles to happen, especially the ones that are not reported. There was a Rav who went to go ahead and give tzitzis to the soldiers towards the beginning of the war. He was going, and they wouldn't let him into the auspices getting close to Oz. He had to stay on the skirts. So when he was there, he got out of his car and he started going to the soldiers, who each one took their pair of tzitzis, and he said, wear this will protect you, and this will protect you. And then there was one person standing on a watchtower, not so high, a little bit, not a super tower up high, a few feet up. And he wasn't able to reach him, so he threw the tzitzis up to him in order to get it to him. The guy reached out and missed the tzitzis, and they fell on the floor. As they seemed to land on the floor, suddenly, out of the ground underneath the watchtower came out two guys with guns and started booking. They started running. There were two terrorists there that were about to try to make a shooting, but they thought when they saw the tzitzis falling that they were discovered, and they thought they were being thrown at them, some type of explosive or something like that, and they started running for their dear life because they realized that they could not make their surprise attack. The tzitzis saved this watch guy's tower life. Again, stories from behind the scenes. One more story I want to mention by the name of Itai Shabi. That's in Berry. He didn't live there, but his wife's family was there, and he unfortunately was there on the wrong day. What was the wrong day that he was there? October 7th, as we understand. And there was terrorists flying around from place to place. And of course, like everybody else, he ran into the mamad room with his wife and his twin young children. They were approximately 1 or 2 years old. And when he was there inside of the mamad, he heard Arabic coming into the house, people speaking Arabic. He heard bullets flying, and they realized that their end was near. He held on to the door of the mamad room for dear life. He held on to it as tight, and he felt people pulling and tugging and pulling. He held on to it like there was no tomorrow, and he said repeatedly, even though this was not a religious man, he was Masorati, he was a nice Sephardi, good person who believes in Hashem, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Shema Yisrael, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam V'ed, Shema Yisrael, Hashem. He said it over and over and over and over again in order to protect them. They were not able to pull and tug at the door until they shot at the mamad more. They shot a few bullets until they actually jammed the door and the handle so the door could not be opened. The door was not able to be opened. They realized that there was nothing to do. So what they did was they went to the air conditioning shaft, they burnt a tire and threw it into the shaft. Mesiras nefesh, these guys, they didn't stop, they don't give up. Into the shaft so that the flames would go, so that the scent would be able to go into the mamad room, and of course would make him obviously have to leave the room because they wouldn't be able to survive inside of there. They left the window open somewhat with mechablim running back and forth over there, and with no choice they jumped out of the window underneath a tree, like a palm tree, which did not cover them up properly. It wasn't like a bush, and they stayed underneath there for over 10 hours. They said it was not normal. We must have been invisible. They were passing to and fro in front of us. Our babies miraculously did not cry the whole entire time, and we were underneath there for 10 hours lying down there, but they definitely even had eye contact with one of them, and he still did not shoot. They went back and forth. He was inches away from them a few times when they were running back and forth on the street, and still, to their dismay, they were not taken. He decided that to find a better place after those 10 hours, and it was getting dark, so they found a ditch, which was covered with some wood, and they started running with the babies into this ditch. While they were running, they heard bullets flying at them. They saw afterwards the bullet holes in the ground that was surrounding the place they ran away from. And they jumped into the bore with the wood on top of them, and nobody came after them. They were actually able to make it underneath there and stayed there for 5 full hours underneath there. They didn't know how they survived. They didn't know what happened. When he came out after 5 hours to peek what's happening, he saw a few red lights. He heard some Hebrew speaking. He realized there were soldiers that called out who saw him. Even though it was nighttime, they were able to see him with their night vision. And they said to quickly speak, and he mentioned his name. He said, "My name is Itai Shabi." He said it with his Israeli accent, and he was rescued and taken back on the jeeps to safety. This person says, "I am Asir Todah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu." He appreciated the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved him and his babies. It was an absolute miraculously savior, and yes, many of the family members of his wife didn't make it. And again, we don't only mention miraculous stories to say about Hashkacha, because everything is Hashkacha. The one who got the bullet and the one who didn't. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides what and where. But at least from here we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always watching us, even behind the scenes, even on things that we didn't necessarily see with our own eyes. There are times in life when you don't even realize what's being felt, and suddenly HaKadosh Baruch Hu is taking care of you. But we only tend to appreciate the big shebang stories, the big ones with the fireworks that are happening, that are told in big events or on the news, etc., are done with a tremendous amount of graphics, but not realizing that behind the scenes, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always working, saying this yes and this one not today. This one is going to happen and this one's not going to happen, because when we see these little things, we'll see it everywhere. How is that connection to our parsha when this will finish? It's all connected. Incredible Chatam Sofer in this parsha. It's in the end of Yoredeah, in his Tshuvot, in Siman Shin Nun Vav, right at the end over there in Yoredeah. He says an incredible observation. Says the Chatam Sofer, the son-in-law of Rav Kiva Eger, that we find that all the parshiot in the Torah we were witness to. Everything we knew. Har Sinai, we were all there. The Makot, we saw them. Splitting of seas, we were there. Moshe Rabbeinu and all the things that he did, all the wars we had, we were all part of it. We were going through all the miracles of 40 years in the desert. It was all together. Here we were. It was all observed. It was all seen, and everything. Even everything that happened in Bereshit, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov Sad, and even what happened in Parshat Bereshit, with the whole Maaseh with Adam Arishon, that was also, says the Chatam Sofer, handed down from Adam Arishon to Shem ben Noach, who handed down to Avram Avinu, etc., etc., etc. There is only one parsha in the Torah which we would have never known about had it not been written by a Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's this parsha, Parshas Balak. He says Parshas Balak is an incredible thing. We were sitting there comfortably, learning Torah in the desert, doing our thing, eating the mun, having the bear of Mayim, the Ananei HaKavod, everything was fine. And we were going through life as usual. But do you realize what a monster was standing on top of a mountain who was about to pull you and shoot you down, finish you off with a bazooka gun? You were being thrown missiles on left and right. And one klala from Bilam was a death sentence. Rip. The cemetery, going straight to where everyone knew the power of Bilam's tongue. He was able to do it in all other wars previous to this. He wasn't stam a loser. There's a reason why they paid him so much money for what he did. How many mizbechot did he? How did we know anything about all the altars, all the mizbechot that he created? The fact that the klala, the attempted curse that he tried to do, turned into a bracha. All the ayin hara that he spilled on top of us, the evil eye. How did it get to us? How did it reach us? I have a separate shiur on the evil eye if you want to see how it works. Who told us about all these events? How do we know his name is Bilam Bichlal? Why did he come? How did he get there? What are the events that happened? What's with this talking donkey? Who had all these things knowing that all of this would have happened? We were sitting there with a pina colada, relaxing, enjoying ourselves in the middle of the midbar, surrounded by some comforting pillow clouds that were around us, and we didn't know of anything that happened. Even, says the Chatam Sofer, Moshe Rabbeinu b'chvoidu ba'atzmai didn't know, of course, until Kodesh Baruch Hu told him to write in the Torah. But had it not been written, this whole entire sipur, we would not have known. It's only a one-hand delivery from a Kodesh Baruch Hu b'chvoidu ba'atzmai, and therefore the Torah is marich, and this whole entire parsha is to teach us one thing: that a Kodesh Baruch Hu shomer aleinu b'cholei tamid. That a Kodesh Baruch Hu takes care of us in every situation all the time. And specifically, like we said, dafka when you don't know. Not the times when there are blatant miracles, the miracles in Persia and the things that were absolute miracles. Statistically, those missiles that were flying here, it wasn't possible. It's impossible. Even the protection device that we have is 90%. 10% has to fall. And when there were 60 ballistic missiles, and they weren't all the same kind, when they're not all the same kind, it had to be obliterated in many different ways, through planes, through the Kippat Barzel, through the different devices that everybody has that came from different countries. And the fact that we were able to get 99%, that was an open miracle. And you know why it wasn't 100%, by the way? Because the Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted to show us from that 1% that this can really land. Just so you know, this is a real realistic blizzard. It caused damage when it fell onto, whatever it landed on. But you just wanted to show, if it was 100%, you'd say, perfect record. Obviously, this wasn't very dangerous. No. There was something dangerous here. There were serious things. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu did us a good favor. But Al Kopanim, why did I mention that miracle? Because that one's popular, that one everyone knows. We're talking about the things behind the scenes. You know, when a person has a certain sickness, a virus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is getting rid of a cancer within a person's body. You get a little bit of sniffles and it goes over, like I'm not feeling well right now. But that is only a passive siyata dishmaya, which we don't even have the capabilities to recognize. The ikar recognition that we have to have of our siyata dishmaya of the hashgacha is dafka the things that we don't even know about. How do you do that? Because we have to know that when things are going well, it must be that there's a reason. Things are not meant naturally to always go well. Things can get a takala. We're very fragile creatures. And here it is, a Kodesh Baruch Hu is protecting us from a Bilam. Kodesh Baruch Hu is protecting us from a Hamas. He's protecting us from everything. These are incredible miracles that a person has to notice. When you think about it, there were almost 3,000 hostile animals that walked in from Gaza, all with guns. And they said, this person who was speaking, by the way, with a story over there in Berry, he said that the worst people were the civilians. They were worse than the Nukhba. They were doing horrific things. And he didn't even want to describe how bad it was. But Al Kopanim, you had animals walking here and throw, and yes, 1,200 people are 1,200 worlds, and it's incredible. The incredible loss that we had, it was so painful. It's unexplainable. It can't be put into words. But Al Kopanim, it's not normal that only 1,200 happened. It could have been thousands. Lo aleinu v'lo alechem, chas v'shalom. 3,000 people. There was no army for 5, 6, 7 hours, and they didn't have pistols. They had machine guns. They had ballistic missiles. They had bazookas. They were able to do incredible things. And Baruch Hashem, Kadosh Baruch Hu's Matzileinu Miyadam. This is the time to recognize, to look back to the incredible hashgacha that we're always watching behind us, how Hashem protects us. And dafka in the times when we think things are bleak, to always make us realize, no, that is the time that Kadosh Baruch Hu was always behind us. Even when things were good, Hashem was behind us and things were bleak. But we didn't even know it was a problem. We didn't even realize. Only now we became cognitive of it. Shabbat Shalom.